Hello and welcome back to the Argyle AI Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our speakers for this session. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during the event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. At any time during the event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page. To ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Also, be sure to subscribe to Argyle on YouTube for exclusive access to all of our past events. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Jason Cerrato, VP, Talent-Centered Transformation at Eightfold AI, and Greg Vert, Human Capital Applied AI Leader at Deloitte Consulting LLP. We are so excited to have Jason and Greg with us for a fireside chat titled From Automation to Transformation, How AI is Reshaping the Way We Work. Welcome, and over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Vicki Lynn, and I'll be joined by Greg as well. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Talent Center Transformation over at Eightfold, but we partner with Deloitte quite a bit, and I've had a chance to partner with Greg in the past, and we've done these events, and the last one we did was a little bit of a time ago, but I still go back to that session and review those materials because I'm so fond of the way Greg and his team are thinking about this. So I'm very excited to get some of the latest and greatest thinking and have this discussion with Greg once again. Greg, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Always a pleasure to spend time with you and to collaborate with the Eightfold team. And as mentioned, my role at Deloitte, I'm the applied AI leader for our human capital practice. Our mission is to make work better for humans and humans better at work. And AI is obviously having a big impact toward that mission. And I'm really excited about the conversation today.
And I love the way you phrase that to kind of kick us off, because your introduction talked about kind of the two sides of this transformation and of this conversation. And one of the things that I'm so interested in is, AI is driving this transformation and causing a lot of the needs to transform, but it's also enabling the transformation as well. So I love how you've introduced this topic to say, this is not unfolding quietly. And one of the things I often say is we've been talking about the future of work for quite some time. And one of the things about the future of work is it's always ahead of us. But I think more than ever, it really is here and we're living through it currently. So as you share with us some of the latest findings, how does that resonate with you?
It totally resonates. And, one of the things that I've been saying a lot lately when I get a chance to talk to clients and others about this topic is we're now in an era where technology is not the barrier, right? Things are moving at the pace, adoption is moving at the pace of organizational change, not the speed of technology. And so we are actually, humans are now the bigger barrier, whether you look at it at the individual level, the team level, or the organization level, in terms of really reinventing or transforming or moving toward that future of work that I think we've been talking about for years now. And yeah, I'll share a couple of statistics that I think start to bring this to life and maybe show exactly where we are in the journey. This is all research from our State of Generative AI in the Enterprise report. It was a study that we ran all throughout 2024, getting quarterly refreshes of the data. This is an invite-only survey, so we've sort of handpicked the people that we want to participate in this based on their role, their title, their expertise. But we did get about 3,000 responses. Wow. So it's statistically significant in terms of pulsing where the market's at. The first stat here: 40% of organizations are investing in a high level of effort in reskilling workers due to Gen AI. I think that speaks to the disruption that we're really still in the early stages of, that are going to force organizations, force companies to really emphasize the development of new skills. And those skills may look very different than the skills we've prioritized in the past.
Correct.
When we think about the role that AI can play, and that's a moving target, right? As AI matures and expands and advances capabilities. And speaking of that, the second stat here: 26% of organizations are already exploring autonomous agents. So I'm sure many of you on the call have heard about agentic AI. It's sort of the next evolution of generative AI, which is interesting because generative AI has only really been around in the mainstream for about 2 years, 2.5 years, when ChatGPT launched toward the end of 2022. Generative AI in technical circles had been around for much longer than that. But I like to say, between October 2022 and early 2023, Gen AI went from a technology conversation to a boardroom conversation to a dinner table conversation, in terms of how quickly it became part of our mainstream dialogue. And I think we're about to see the same thing happen with agentic AI. So that's the new terminology that everyone's talking about. It is about autonomous agents that can perform tasks with little to no human intervention, or where we can design very specifically that where that human intervention should take place, which we often call human in the loop. And there's lots of different flavors of that human in the loop. But this is all about boosting productivity, and it's going to drive the redistribution of human resources, financial resources, facilities, and you name it, right? This is really where a lot of that disruption is going to happen. And then the third stat: 67% of organizations have started to integrate their most advanced Gen AI initiative or effort into core business processes. And what we found in our research is that this is actually the way to get the highest return or maximize the benefits from generative AI in particular, is to embed it deeply into functions and business processes to drive transformational results. And then the last piece of this, which I think completes the story a little bit, is that 78% of organizations do not today consider their talent to be highly prepared to adopt Gen AI tools. And that's where the dependency on adoption to create or realize value from AI investments is going to be a big focus for organizations in the next 12 to 18 months, which will require a lot of this rapid and unprecedented training and education to increase the fluency and proficiency of the workforce. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving pieces to this. That's just some of the data that we've pulled out of the research to kind of get the conversation going today.
And I think when you look at that research and those stats, it's telling the story of how this is comprehensive. It is not kind of single streamed, single threaded. All of the change, all of the needs, all of the transformation is happening in a variety of places. And the organization of tomorrow looks very different than the organization of today. So it's not just enhancing or optimizing, it really is rethinking and transforming, in part because this concept of agentic AI not only adds automation, it adds decision making in a way that impacts how we look at productivity, how we look at org design, how we look at work design. I love how you talk about this kind of redistribution of resources. We've been talking to leaders who are talking about maximizing artificial resources and amplifying human intelligence, right? And trying to figure out what that looks like in the workforce of tomorrow. But then to your last stat there, what that requires in terms of training and preparedness for how those resources are going to work together, and then how that's going to happen in a way to deliver to customers, to drive innovation, to help with collaboration, because also the way we learn, I'm assuming, is going to be very different.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that a little bit more in our conversation, but I completely agree. And from our perspective, we are in the early stages of the largest work redesign since the Industrial Revolution, 100 plus years ago. And it's being fueled primarily by AI, but that's not the only component. It's not the only part of the equation. And we know, based on what we've seen already and just kind of general direction of travel, that this revolution is going to be much faster paced than what we saw in the Industrial Revolution. So we have to be really proactive and have a bias toward action in order to navigate the transformation transition that we're, like I said, really at the very beginning of.
One question I want to ask as we kind of spend the next half hour together or so, the last time we met and we were having this kind of discussion, the focus was a lot on skills. I think these days we may not be talking about skills as much, but skills is very much a part of this exercise in this conversation, because the way we work, the tools we're using are changing. And as a result, skills are a component of this discussion still. Am I correct in thinking about that way, Greg?
100%. Yeah. And a lot of our clients are at different stages of maturity in their movement toward a skills-based way of thinking about and managing talent, human talent. And I still think skills give us the best data to understand the capabilities of our human workforce. And right now we're starting to actually see the concept of skills getting applied to AI and to digital workers as well. It gives us a framework to define the capabilities of our AI agents. So skills are still a very useful framework, and data set that can help you to architect the right workforce, both human and machine. And it helps you on both the supply and the demand side, right? So you can define the skills and the composition of your workforce, again, both human and machine. But you can also define the needs of the business through skills. So it gives us a lot of versatility. And one of the things that I believe is going to carry a premium over the next few years is organizational agility. Agility will become more important than expertise in a post-knowledge economy. And that agility is something that a lot of organizations are struggling to, especially large organizations that have been around for hundreds of years, or a really long time. It's hard for them to move and become more agile. There's a lot to unravel to get there. But again, skills give you the ability to improve that organizational agility and the movement of talent, again, both human and AI, around your organization. So I think it's a big part of it. We are seeing, though, that there is another ingredient to the puzzle, another piece to the puzzle, and that's what we're calling work intelligence. So when we only look at the skills side of things, we miss out on the fundamental building blocks of the work itself. And so there's this whole emerging category of solutions that help us to deconstruct the work that has to get done and help us to map that work to skills, and then the skills to the right human and or machine, or in most cases combination, to deliver that type of work. So that's kind of where we are, is figuring out how to map work to skills and skills to the right resources, in order to move forward in a strategic and purposeful way. Versus, I think what we've seen, and this is no different with AI, is when we let the technology lead the transformation versus strategy, the results are diminished.
Yeah. 100% agree. And I think that's how the conversation has evolved and shifted a little bit. And, I loved what you said around kind of organizations that have been doing this for some time and their history not being as valuable as they're building for a future that looks very different. I've seen a couple different approaches with some of the organizations that we've partnered with. I had one that are sitting on hundreds of data that as they go to new, it's not as valuable to them anymore, and they need to help surface the unknown and prepare and plan for the unexpected. We had another organization that said, they were 100-plus-year-old organization that's trying to refuse to act their age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to think innovative and think progressive and act young and fresh. And then I had a third, and I think you referenced this in the beginning, around in the past when they've tried this, the technology wasn't quite there yet. And they've talked about now the technology has caught up, and the word that they keep using is now the technology unlocks a lot of capability, and it unlocks a lot of visibility to develop strategy and to deal with uncertainty in real time and on demand and create agility. But part of that is, and I think you also mentioned this, the actual team members, the humans, need to catch up, right? And you need to deal with change management and culture and how this benefits them as well, in kind of the win-win of how things like talent intelligence empower the organization, but also empower the individual experience. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what this means for where organizations start and empowering the workforce?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to switch us to our next slide here, because I think it's a helpful framework to have this conversation. We're sort of seeing 5 key things that are needed to help manage the transition and navigate the workforce transformation that we just described. 3 of them are a little bit more urgent than the other 2, so I'm going to start with the ones in the blue boxes. But this all starts with driving adoption and engagement. People have to be open to and look for ways to use AI in their day-to-day work. And so driving that adoption and getting people to use tools and to change their behaviors and to work in different ways is a key part of all of this. And without the adoption, the rest of the stuff sort of doesn't matter. But what we're finding is that in order to enable that adoption, you have to create a culture or an environment where experimentation is encouraged, innovation is encouraged. A lot of organizations have been on that journey for a while as well, trying to become more nimble and innovative. This is going to be a forcing function to get there, because if AI becomes a competitive advantage and we can't harness that competitive advantage unless we drive adoption and engagement, and we can't drive adoption and engagement unless we have the right culture, you can see where the dominoes start to fall.
Sure.
And we know that trust is a huge part of this. And when we talk about trust, it's not only trust in the technology, because AI works very differently than any previous generation of technology. And we as humans have this weird mindset and relationship with technology where we think of it very binary. This either works or it doesn't work. And that's where terms like break fixes and defects come into a vernacular. AI is not like that. I mean, yes, there could be a legitimate defect in an AI model that needs to be fixed, but most of it is more about capability development, the same way we would think about developing a person on our team. And we have a role in that. Humans are accountable for the outcomes of AI. And so building up that trust and building up that accountability is really important. But it's also trust in leadership and leadership's incentives and motivations for investing in AI, not as a replacement of human workers, but to augment human workers and to really unlock human potential, which I think, Jason, you started to hit on there. And then the third piece of this, and I'll pause because I want to get your thoughts, Jason, before we go to the green boxes. But the third piece of this is all about the fluency and skills. And we think about this from a persona-driven perspective. There is a level of fluency that virtually every worker on the planet, regardless of what job you have, what role you have, will need to be a responsible and effective user of AI and to be able to collaborate effectively with machines. And then there are skills beyond that, right? So you think about someone that's building and delivering AI solutions. They, obviously will need to have more technical skills. They'll need to know the underworkings of AI. They'll need to understand the relationship between AI and data, and be able to build out different use cases as we progress. And then you think about people leaders. They're going to need a different set of skills. And executives who are driving the strategy for the organization are going to need a different set of skills. And so there's lots of skill building needed, in that persona-driven approach, I think, is the right way to go at it. Starting with the fluency for all, the information that everybody needs to thrive, be successful in an AI-powered world. But Jason, I'm curious to bounce those three ideas up against what you're seeing in the market.
Yeah, and I think this also continues this kind of looking at the conversation from two sides, right? There's the use of AI as a tool. There's the incorporation of AI as a teammate. There's the adoption of AI as part of getting the work done. And then there's amplifying the human work that remains beyond the work the AI is doing, right? So all of this becomes multifaceted for organizations to address from a learning and development perspective, for employees to understand from a employability and a sustainability perspective. And I think, you mentioned around this is going to be the future of careers and kind of employability with developing your skills in a much more agile way.
Mm-hmm.
It's, what does it mean? Answer at your fingertips, and you have automation with agentic teammates as part of your org? Or how do you design orgs where now traditionally they've been designed for how decisions were made or how information needed to be controlled, and those two elements are handled very differently in an agentic world, right? We've already seen a lot of research along those lines. But then also, if let's take HR for example, since it's near and dear to our heart. If the HR function is servicing and answering questions to the organization, but now think of the organization as a customer, they're much more informed from their own use of AI and asking questions and getting answers at their fingertips. By the time they come to HR, the level of question that they're going to ask is much more further along, and the level of expertise that that HR person or leader or associate's going to have is at a much higher level. So you're amplifying the need for that human interaction, because now it's beyond just a transaction, right? Now,
That's right.
it's critical. Now it's critical thinking. Now it's strategy. Now it's at another level. So there's the technical component of this. There's the amplification of the human component of this, and even if it's emotional connection, we didn't mention that yet, right?
Yep.
So all of this has kind of a multifaceted approach as leaders and organizations are designing for how we're going to work in the future.
Yeah, and what you're starting to get at there are what we call enduring human capabilities. These are the things that AI is really not a threat to replace or replicate in the near future. And it is things like critical thinking, curiosity, empathy, creativity, and that those are going to be the human capabilities that will carry a premium in an AI-driven world. And to your example with HR, you can see that play out in action, right? Where you can imagine certain HR scenarios require a level of human empathy that AI can't replicate. And the right service delivery model or the right experience design is for a worker to get, or a manager to get connected directly with that HR expert right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the situation. There are going to be other situations though that are much more transactional.
Yep.
I need to understand a policy. I need to execute a process, whatever it might be. And in that situation, we actually would expect that AI would be able to do most of that work, but you still have to have that expert behind the scenes that is not only monitoring AI and ensuring that we're getting the right results, the right outcomes, but also driving continuous improvement and being there as a backstop for unprecedented situations, exception handling, stuff that AI can't address because it's never been addressed before. And that's where those enduring human capabilities come back and become really important, because what that expert needs to be able to do in that situation is an advanced and highly nuanced level of problem solving that only the top experts in their field will be able to do. So you can see where the work shift in HR is going to move away from service delivery, process execution, operational focus that it has today, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, to one where you're scaling expertise through AI and you're putting a premium on those enduring human capabilities, like empathy and advanced problem solving through critical thinking.
And I think that brought us to the right side of your chart in designing for this human machine collaboration, or as I mentioned, one of the talking about optimizing artificial human intelligence, or this kind of work redesign for where are you automating transactions and driving efficiency, and where are you inserting those human interactions where it's either a higher level of critical thinking or those emotional moments that require compassion or empathy or some type of connection.
Yep, that's right. And I go back to the word intentional, because I think right now a lot of organizations are looking to take advantage of AI, but they don't have a good strategy that balances what AI can do and do really well, but also how do you reorganize humans as AI takes on some of the traditional work we've done, to get the benefit of not only the technology, but the capacity that's created that can be reinvested to unlock human potential. And that's where this human and machine collaboration concept comes to play. And you really have to look at this almost on a role by role basis, or function by function basis, because the right combination of humans and machines will look different. It'll look different even within the same function, but at different organizations and different industries. So there's not going to be a one size fits all design for how to get this right. It's going to be something that you'll have to architect, specifically for your organization and across different workforce segments. But we like to think of it in a little bit of a framework where every role in your organization is at least going to be assisted by AI in the future. Even if the human is primarily responsible for doing the work, they will get some level of AI assistance, and there's benefits in that. Most roles, especially your knowledge workers, are going to be heavily augmented, meaning work is going to pass back and forth between humans and AI, allowing us to move faster, to do more with less. So it's a little bit about efficiency, but it's a lot about velocity. Our ability to work faster and get things done faster with better outcomes, better outputs. There is going to be some work that we call kind of AI powered. I think the HR service desk or HR contact center is a great example of this, where AI should largely take the heavy lifting away from humans, because we can train it to answer those questions. But humans will still need to play an important role behind the scenes in monitoring AI, driving continuous improvement, and being there to handle those anomalies, unprecedented situations with the right expertise. And there is a level beyond all of that, which is pure autonomous AI, where there may be some areas that we can completely take our hands off the wheel, because AI actually can do it better than we can. And I think a lot of data-rich processes with a lot of large data analysis will fall into that category over time, but there won't be a lot. It'll take some time to get there. But just being thoughtful about that progression in designing your workforce, human and machine, in an intentional way, is half the battle. And really thinking about not just the deployment of AI from a technology perspective, but also the impact that it has on your workforce, your organization, and being able to navigate those changes in parallel. So it doesn't become a situation where you've deployed a bunch of AI and now you're sitting around looking at, what I call skills debt or talent debt,
Right.
which are people that have a set of skills that are no longer needed at the same volume within your organization, and now you find yourself with a problem to address. Right, you kind of want to manage that all along the way as you're delivering AI. Yeah.
So I was just at a talent management in person 2 ago, and I came to the room, people on the stage, and I said, how many of you in the room in your organizations have gone through some type of a skills project or initiative? And almost everybody raised their hand. And then I said, either before or after, how many of you in the room have gone through some type of job architecture review or initiative? And almost everybody raised their hand. Then I started raising some of the points that you just discussed about how this is changing so fast, and how with work design and org design and this new way of operating with kind of this redistribution of work and this human machine collaboration, this org model is going to look very different. I said, how many of you did that job architecture work with some of that in mind? And there were very few hands remaining. For the organizations that you're partnering with, do you see people starting to think about that? Is that why they're reaching out to you? Is that still a new frontier for the folks in the audience that may be hearing this today, maybe for the first time? Is this still early days, or kind of what's your read on this?
Yeah, and you're really kind of getting at the last box on here, the work redesign. I don't think we've reached a state yet where the cumulative effect that AI has on any particular part of your organization has required a full-scale redesign of work, the way work gets done, and the makeup composition of the workforce. But it's coming soon, and I do think some of the early movers are trying to get ahead of this, recognizing that this is going to be the problem for HR to solve. It's the two things on the right. This is going to be the challenge for HR. It's architecting the right human and machine workforce and making sure that collaboration exists in a way that helps you achieve your goals, and then redesigning the work that humans do along the way so that our role within the organization continues to make sense and that we're adding more value over time as AI takes things off of our plate. And I think that work redesign is a little bit more on the frontier, but organizations are starting to tackle it, and we're seeing certain workforce segments like software development or engineering being impacted first.
Yeah, of course.
And the driving force behind that is that's been an area of talent scarcity for a long time.
Sure.
And now organizations can figure out how to combine that human and machine workforce in a way where it offsets the talent gaps that they may have had, and that have been impacting their ability to progress against their digital ambitions. And so work redesign in that space makes a lot of sense. It makes sense to prioritize that. And the ways that engineers, developers partner with AI to code, test, deliver solutions is going to change pretty significantly over the next 12 to 18 months.
So, Greg, the last time we met, one of the things that you shared that really caught my attention was you had shared some kind of early thinking on kind of the HR org of the future in an AI-enabled world. As we reconvene to chat today, what are your thoughts on kind of the future of where HR can go and how we can kind of think, manage, and measure differently as an HR function?
Yeah, I'll start here, which is going back to the vision for the future, strategic ambition for HR, because I really look at this as an opportunity for HR to reinvent itself. You kind of talked about that earlier, that this should be transformational. It should be about reimagining the way things get done, not about layering AI onto the way things have always been done just to create some incremental benefits. And that's really what this first graph is really intending to show, which is if your strategy right now is business as usual or do nothing, maintain the status quo, your value proposition to the business and to the workforce is actually going to erode over time because the expectations of the workforce are going to change and elevate, and the needs of the business are going to change and elevate. And so doing nothing is really not an option if you're an HR leader right now. But the other thing that I see a lot of is this short term focus on driving out cost. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of opportunity to create efficiencies and capacity within HR by adopting AI and applying AI in the right areas. But our point of view is that if that's all you focus on, you're eventually going to squeeze as much as you can out of HR, and your value proposition will plateau, and then possibly even erode over time after you've reached that plateau. The way that we advocate thinking about it is really more with a lens of value creation. This is where you're driving those efficiencies out. So we're not ignoring that because that is a big opportunity, but you're actually being strategic about where you reinvest the capacity that you create in building new capabilities to help architect the human and machine workforce of the future and to help lead that massive work redesign that, as we said, is the biggest we've seen since the Industrial Revolution. So I think that's the first piece of this. The second piece of it is, well, HR is going to have a different shape then in the future, right? Because today, as we talked about before, about half of the human power in the HR function is spent on process execution and service delivery. And that's the stuff that AI can do really well. That's the stuff we can shift. But very little time is spent on delivering workforce insights and solutions. And when I say insights and solutions, I mean things like an onboarding assistant that can guide you through a personalized journey when joining a new organization to help you get up to speed, build your network, and become productive in your role without the need for a lot of HR manual support. It's also about things like embedded analytics and decision intelligence. So anytime you're making a talent-related decision, you've got the best data surfaced to you to help improve the outcome from that decision, help you make the best choices. And with AI and kind of following that progression that we talked about earlier of some work being AI assisted, some work being fully augmented, some work being AI powered, we can actually invert this triangle and change the shape of HR, where most of our human power is being dedicated toward the more valuable workforce and insights and solutions that the business and the workforce need now more than ever. And the last thing to kind of call out here, and I'd love to get your thoughts, is that we talk a lot about AI. AI is the in the spotlight right now, but it's not the only thing that has to happen to make this shift work, right? It's AI plus other technology will come to bear. It is reskilling and redeploying humans, and it's investing in those enduring human capabilities that we talk a lot about. And it's going to lead us down the path of creating much more dynamic work and organization structures. The operating model of the past will go away, and I think we'll start to see elements of HR becoming more embedded in the business, or what we call boundaryless HR. Some elements of it, being brought together on enterprise platforms, along with other enabling areas like IT and finance,
Yeah.
so that it becomes a shared platform. And so the shape and structure will look very different. And that's all work that'll happen over the next, I would guess, 2 to 3 years for most HR teams.
So as I was listening to you over and then seeing this diagram here, it makes perfect sense, and it's a wonderful description of the shift in the type of activity and where time is going to be spent and going to be focused. But also beyond the technology, where is the work? Where's the transformation? I think one of the things that I'm concerned and excited about is a lot of organizations right now are spending a lot of time focusing on intentional and strategic collaboration. Because if you look at the world on the left, my left, the traditional pyramid, a lot of that process execution and service delivery and enablement was roles and positions in a career path where people learned on the job.
Yeah, that's right.
And as those positions become fewer and far between, and people are expected to have higher levels of capability and higher levels of strategic thinking, where does that come from? Right? It's going to have
Yeah,
to be developed in a new way. And a lot of it is going to
that's
have
right.
to be developed with experts collaborating and training with people that are just joining the organization or are new to the function. And we're going to have to develop new ways of learning and development. I've seen this phrased a lot of different ways where L&D is being disrupted, where L&D is kind of increasingly the new way to acquire talent internally, right? But we need to rethink it entirely because a lot of the traditional ladders are no longer
Mhm.
ladders, and the work that's going to be required is going to have to be developed in a very different way.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And just a few quick thoughts on that. And then maybe we can switch to some of the questions we got from the audience. Entry level, the way we think about entry level careers, that's going to change dramatically. The way that we think about building expertise and sourcing expertise, I think, is going to change. To your point, AI gives us the ability to scale expertise, so we may not need as many experts in the future in certain areas that we have today, but you're still going to need them. And so the question is, how do you build that or borrow that or buy that when you need it? If there's not as many as there has been in the past because of the change in the shape of the structure of HR. But I also think there's a reason why none of these bars go to 0%, and there will still be opportunities for people to gain those experiences throughout their career in HR or any other domain. But it just is going to look different, and we have to be really intentional about building that pipeline of experts for the future and thinking differently about succession planning, because if you do this the wrong way, I think there are unintended consequences of you all of a sudden realizing that you no longer have the human capabilities, the human expertise that you need in order to run your business. And I think that's the risk we take of moving too fast here and only thinking from a technology perspective.
Yeah. So Greg, we have a few questions that have come in, and while we have a few more minutes, if anyone has other questions, feel free to submit them. One of which is, and I think you alluded to this, just the amount of discussion and frequency of people talking about agentic AI in the market and in the industry and on sessions like this. And there was a question just around how is this different from Chat GPT and other tools like Gemini and things that we've been
Mhm.
working with over the last few years?
Yeah. No, Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, these are all examples of language models that have been trained with massive volumes of unstructured data, mostly from the internet and social media, that can now replicate natural language interactions between human and machines in a way that we could not 2 years ago. And it gets better and better every day. It's also generative in nature. It's generative AI, obviously. So it can create things in a variety of different modalities that are derivative of the data that it's been trained on, but net new. So it's creating new things that have never existed before. That is really, really powerful. But when you combine that capability, think of that as like the front end capability with agentic AI, which gives you enhanced reasoning, the ability to plan out and execute workflows, allowing you to go after more end to end automation. integrated with your company's data, your company's applications, so that it can execute processes in different systems like your HCM or your ERP on behalf of a human or in place of a human. And it has memory capabilities so that it can learn and adapt based on interactions, real world experiences. What we're starting to get at with agentic AI is much closer to and on the path toward artificial general intelligence, which is where we start to see AI match the human mind in almost every dimension. And so I think of agentic AI as a step toward that, and it gives us a much more powerful tool set when we think about deploying AI within our organizations.
So maybe going back to your chart with the three blue and the two green, in what ways should business leaders approach kind of redefining job roles to ensure AI complements human workers rather than replacing them? I think part of this is getting data in real time for how the work is changing and how the skills are changing. But a big part of this is adoption and engagement, that those use cases for trust and communication. I know Deloitte talks a lot about building that opportunity to play and learn in a trusting environment to kind of figure out that mix between human and machine. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about some things we haven't covered yet that I think are really important. The first is making sure there's alignment on the future vision and what outcomes you're trying to create for the business. And I always make sure that you're pairing business outcomes with human outcomes. And I think the best use cases or the highest priority opportunities that any organization should pursue are opportunities where the enterprise benefits, the workforce benefits, and society or your customers benefit. If you can balance all three of those, that's going to be a winning strategy for your AI program. If you find yourself in a situation where it's hard to articulate the human benefits, the human outcomes, whether it's to the workforce, your customers, or society, then you may be going after something that may not have as big or profound of an impact as something else you could consider. So I think just creating the right balance between business and human outcomes is a good place to start. And then everything else on here, comes into play next. This is more the tactical side of it, of how do we actually get to that end goal of, and I use end goal lightly because it's going to be an ongoing moving target.
Sure.
But how do you get to that ultimate goal of humans and machines working in the most efficient, effective, and responsible way, collaborative and responsible way possible?
And I know we have only a minute or two left. At Eightfold, we use information like talent intelligence and skills insights to look at your existing workforce, your talent network, the audience that you're considering, to not only identify these talent capabilities from a perspective of existing skills, and then their ability to learn and capability to learn other things very quickly, as we're thinking about creating agility and moving people and redeploying people into other areas as work unveils itself with new tools. But we had a question that came in around, how can we address, or how are you seeing organizations address this skills debt related to AI and this transformation?
Yeah, I mean, the best place to start is getting really good data at your disposal to help improve the decisions that you have to make. And that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of, do you really understand the skills makeup of your workforce, your human workforce, and your AI workforce? Do you understand the skills needs of the business, which are going to change as strategy evolves, business strategy evolves? And then do you understand and have an ability to deconstruct the work that people do in a way where you can start to map work to skills? And what you'll see as you go through that is that certain skills in your organization that you may have a lot of today, you may not need as much of in the future. And so you've got a skills surplus. And so how do you rationalize or reconcile that? And in other areas, you may actually find that you have a skills deficit where what you need is bigger than what you have. And then it becomes a conversation of, well, how do you address that skills deficit through a combination of humans and AI as you progress?
So with that, I want to thank the audience for submitting some great questions. Greg, as always, I love partnering with you, so I appreciate the thinking that you brought to the table and the discussion with you. I'm sure I'll be referring to this for some time going forward and look forward to an opportunity to partner with you again. And with that, I think we've landed the plane on time, so I'd like to hand it back over to the Argyle team.
Thank you
Thanks all.
so
Thanks, Jason.
much. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Jason. What a fabulous discussion. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session and remind you that this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And our next session will begin at 1:25 p.m. That's Eastern time, and after a short break, which will be a keynote presentation titled Governance: Building Blocks for AI. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be directed to that session. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again, Jason and Greg.
Thank you.